Welcome, everyone. This is the first screencast in our series on methods and metrics. Fundamentally, what we're trying to do with this unit is give you help with your projects, and specifically give you help with the experimental aspects of your project. And so the kind of highlight topics for us will be around things like managing your data set for the purposes of conducting experiments, establishing baseline systems, and in turn, doing model comparisons between baselines and an original system, or between an original system and published results in the literature, and so forth. And relatedly, we're going to give you some advice on how to optimize your models effectively. Those are the kind of the highlight topics there, and I would say that all of this is kind of oriented toward the more abstract topic of helping you navigate tricky situations that arise as you conduct experiments in NLP. And as you'll see, very often these tricky situations arise because we encounter limitations in the data that's available to us, or we're just fundamentally constrained in terms of computing resources, and that leads us to have to make some compromises in the ideal experimental protocol that we would use. These things are inevitable, and the idea here is that we're going to equip you with some tools and techniques for thinking about the trade-offs and making your way through all of these tricky situations. There are a bunch of associated materials for these screencasts. We have a whole notebook that's on metrics. I'm going to offer some screencasts that just highlight a few of the metrics that are discussed in that notebook, but it's meant as a resource, the notebook itself, so that you could pursue other avenues. And overall, what I'm trying to do is give you a framework for thinking about what metrics encode in terms of their values, what bounds they have, and where they can be applied and misapplied. Scikit-learn implements essentially all of the metrics that we'll be discussing. And to their credit, they've done a wonderful job of offering rich documentation that will, again, help you not only understand what the metrics do, but also where and how they can be effectively applied. And then there is an entire notebook that's on methods, especially experimental methods. And that covers a lot of the tricky situations that I just described in terms of setting up experiments and thinking about trade-offs, and then following through on model evaluation and so forth. And that notebook is nice as a supplement to these screencasts because it embeds a bunch of code that could help you run hands-on experiments to get a feel for the core concepts. And we have two readings. Resnick and Lin 2010 is a wonderful overview of experimental evaluations in the context of NLP, and Smith 2011 Appendix B is a compendium of different metrics. So another good resource for you if you're unsure about how a metric works or what its bounds are or how it's calculated and things like that. The final thing I want to say for this overview relates specifically to the projects that you'll be pursuing. And the bottom line for us is that we will never evaluate a project based on how good the results are. Now, we acknowledge that in the field and throughout science, publication venues do this because they have additional constraints on space nominally, and that leads them, as a cultural fact about the way science works, to favor positive evidence for new developments over negative results. I frankly think this is unfortunate and exerts a kind of distorting influence on the set of publications that we all get to study, but nonetheless, that's the way the world works at present. In the context of this course, we are not subject to that constraint, so we can do the right and good thing scientifically, evaluating positive results, negative results, and everything in between. So I repeat our core value here. We will never evaluate a project based on how good the results are. Instead, we're going to evaluate your project on the appropriateness of the metrics that you choose, the strength of your methods, and really fundamentally here, the extent to which your paper is open and clear-sighted about the limits of its findings. So you'll notice that given this framework here, you could report state-of-the-art results, world record-breaking results on a task, but nonetheless not succeed with a project if it fails on all of these things that we've listed under our true values. And conversely, you might have a hypothesis that turns out to be a miserable failure in terms of the performance metrics that you're able to report. But that could lead to an outstanding grade in the context of this course, provided that you do all of these things. And that would be under the heading of a negative result that nonetheless teaches us something really fundamental and important about NLP and therefore pushes the field forward.